What up, guys? The Bench Buddies are back with our Week 13 college football preview and picks. As always, I got Ty joining me here to break down this week's biggest games. But before we get into this week, we got to talk about last week. Obviously, a good week for both of us picking the games, 8-3, 9-2. But Ty, last week, what was your biggest surprise and takeaway?
I don't know if either of these were surprises, but I think you got to look at Georgia and Kansas as the biggest results. Georgia playing their way back in, with Tennessee now being the first team out, and BYU's big fall from 6 to 14 after their loss. So they have to win out and win the Big 12 now, or they're out. So big drop for them.
I'm with you there. And I think still getting overlooked at this point in the season. Can we please give SMU the credit that they deserve? I
Yeah,
mean, this team I think it's the best team in the ACC. It might be a hot
it
take.
is.
The way they're playing football, I think they deserve to be up there. And, I did even pick against them last week in my locks of the week because I think the 18.5 was a lot of points for an NFL led team. Coach had, Bill O'Brien leading that team into a tough environment. Thought that was too many points, and obviously that worked out. But other than that, it was a rough week.
Yeah, I was right there. You flip those giant 28.5 point spreads, and I'm 6-0. But yeah, I think Arizona State is the maybe the hottest team in the country right now. And I'm just gonna spoil it right now. I have them in my locks again this week. I just think they're playing as good as anyone, not only in the Big 12, but in the country at this moment. And then Georgia really putting themselves back on the map.
Yeah, I agree. I like the Arizona State. I'm going kind of some different ways here. I don't think these are too many popular picks. I'm taking the Florida plus 11. What they've done the last few weeks has shown me they can compete with the big teams. It's just a little too late for the record wise, obviously. So I like the 11 against Ole Miss. Sam Houston State plus 6 at Jacksonville State. Huge game for that conference. Conference USA, it's pretty much whoever wins that gets into the championship. Indiana, Ohio State, over 52.5 points. I think if Indiana has a chance, they're going to have to keep on scoring. Colorado -3 against Kansas. I think they, keep on scoring and they score late to probably hit either a big one possession win or a close two possession game. Army plus 14 at Notre Dame. It's hard to bet against an undefeated team. I just can't bring myself to take the 14 for Notre Dame. And then I like Vandy on the road to LSU, who not only is just losing games, they're also losing commits.
Yeah, big loss for them. But I got Utah +7. I know maybe last week it was that I said Utah sucks. Iowa State's not really that much better. It's at Utah, still a tough place to play. So I think they cover. I think Arizona State, that's probably my lock of the week, which means it probably won't hit. But I think Arizona State is just going to blow out BYU. I think they've been playing so much better than them at the moment. It's at home. And they have maybe the coach of the year in the country if Kurt Signetti didn't exist. So they cover that. I do think Ohio State is going to have their way with Indiana. As much as I would love to see the Hoosiers pull that off, I just don't see them super competitive in that game. I think it'll be about a 20-point win. This actually isn't too much of a homer pick this week with Michigan. I actually think they cover that. Obviously, the vibes are high with the program. They've been playing well. They actually hung with Oregon for a while, played well against Indiana on the road. So I think they cover against Northwestern. And then Western Kentucky and UCLA, I actually think they win those games outright. USC, I think, is trending towards not bringing Lincoln Riley back next year. So I think he's kind of lost the locker room there, and we'll see that this week.
Yeah, no, first game is that Ole Miss Florida game. I'm taking Ole Miss because, for them it's win or you're out of the playoff. 8-2 versus a good Florida team right now at the moment. Like I said, I'll take the points, but straight up, I'm going to go with Ole Miss.
Yeah, I think another thing I said last week was keeping Billy Napier was a terrible decision for Florida. Still don't know if it's a good decision, but I definitely saw the vision last week with that big win over LSU. They have some pieces. So I do think this will be a really close game. But I do think just Ole Miss's defense is going to be a little too much for Lagway in the end. And I think they win kind of a low scoring struggle.
Then the next game, like I said, Sam Houston, Jacksonville State. I'm going with Sam Houston on the road. I think that, this team, both of these teams actually, just joined the FBS just a few years ago. And here they are playing for a conference championship, more than likely. I'm going with the Bearcats. I just think that they're kind of on a crash course for this title. They've played really good. Obviously, they're out of conference, lost a few games, but undefeated in conference, and I think that trend continues.
I'm going the other way. I think Jack State ends up winning Conference USA when it's all said and done, and this game will propel them into the championship. I think I have no idea what the standings look like, but I know they're probably the best team in the conference at this very moment.
Yeah, the standings are these four teams right here that you're now seeing. Those
Yeah.
four at the top, two of them have one loss, two of them are undefeated. And
All
I
right.
think Eastern Kentucky, they're gonna stay undefeated in the conference and give Liberty their second loss in the conference. And Liberty just hasn't been the same team. You know, Caden Salter came into the year being a top, what, third round pick, maybe second round pick, maybe even first on some people's draft boards, but he has played his way to a day three draft pick this year. And I like Western Kentucky, the Hilltoppers. They're going to go in there, get a big win, and more than likely lock up a spot in the Conference USA Championship.
Yeah, I think whatever Liberty was, were they 6-0, 7-0 before these two losses? I want to say they were 7-0. They were the worst 7-0 team of all time. No disrespect, maybe a little, but they just were really squeaking by some really bad teams. And I want to say they lost to Kennesaw State, if I'm not mistaken, and
They
they
did.
had zero wins. So this team is really just reeling at the moment. And Western Kentucky has been maybe the most consistent program in this conference over the last decade or so. And I think they put themselves in the race with a road win.
And then on Fox, obviously the biggest game of the week, Indiana, Ohio State. This is a crime that Fox keeps putting these games as big noon kickoff. It kind of sucks, but it is what it is. It's just what Fox is known for. And I'm going with Ohio State at home. You know, it pains me to pick Ohio State, but I just think that Indiana, Ohio State, the repertoire and what this moment means for these teams moving forward. Indiana, you're still going to make the playoff if you keep this a close game, in my eyes. Ohio State, if you lose this game, you might not make the playoff. So Ohio State has more to lose here in this game, and I think that's why they're going to play a little more aggressive.
Yeah, the big thing for Indiana, it sounds like the general consensus is not only they don't exactly have to win this game, they just have to be competitive enough where it looks like they're one of the 12 best teams in the country. I don't know. I think it's going to be a score where it's right on the edge. I think Ohio State wins, we'll say like 34-14, somewhere in there. And it's going to be really tight as to whether Indiana was competitive enough. So that being said, I think Ohio State covers that -10 easily, really pulls away in the second half and has their way with Indiana. There's just way too much talent on one side in this game.
Yeah, and then moving to the 3:30 slate, talk about talent. Obviously, you got Travis Hunter, more than likely is going to win the Heisman. And then you got Shador, probably a top five pick next year in the NFL draft. And this Colorado team, I think this is their toughest challenge they faced all year in the Big 12, going on the road to Kansas, who's on fire right now. Probably 1B under Arizona State for hottest teams in college football right now. Two ranked wins at starting at 2-6. Now you're 4-6. Kansas needs to win out to remain to get bowl eligible, and I don't think they do. I think Colorado goes in there and they assert themselves as one of the best teams, not only in the Big 12, but possibly in the whole college football playoff. And I think when it's all said and done, they might have a shot at a playoff berth as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a huge test for them. I mean, Kansas, I said it last week, they were the best 3-6 team of all time. Now they're the best 4-6 team of all time. Because they're a couple bounces away from maybe being 8-2 and in Colorado's position. But that being said, if you've been following these videos, you would think I was preying on Colorado's downfall, picking against them every week. I'm not going to do it anymore. I think they are ready for this big road test. I don't think they'll fall into this trap game. They have obviously the two best players on the field, and I think that's all the difference in this game. I think they win a close one.
And then also another huge game. Like we said, we're both going with Arizona State here. What we saw from BYU at the beginning, from beginning to where we are now, I would probably say they're 7-3 if you didn't know the results of every game, just because of how they finished. Probably should have lost to Oklahoma State, ended up winning that one. Obviously, just a few weeks ago, found a way to win that one. But last week, obviously, suffered their first loss. And Arizona State, like you said, hottest team in college football right now, playing some really good football. And at home in a big game that pretty much whoever loses this is out of the college football playoff conversation. So give me the Sun Devils.
Yeah, I said it in the locks. I think Arizona State actually wins this fairly easily. I think they win by at least two scores. Two teams are just these two teams are really trending in complete opposite directions. BYU coming off that loss, but they tried to lose two or three times before that, if not more. And Arizona State, they're going to give BYU a very heavy dose of Cam Skatteboo in this game. My favorite name in college football. I think he has a big night, and the Sun Devils just continue to roll and get to 9-2.
Then moving to the nightcap, you got Army, Notre Dame. I think you couldn't made a better matchup this late in the season for Notre Dame, not only for their resume, but also the anticipation around this game. I think Army, coming in undefeated at this point, no one saw that coming. And what they're doing is obviously great for the game of football. But I think unfortunately it comes to an end here. Notre Dame is playing really good football right now, and it's kind of hard to believe after what week one they go beat A&M, and then the following week you lose to Northern Illinois, and everyone thinks, the gates had broken loose. But like I guess we can compare Indiana here for a second. If Indiana loses this week to Ohio State and they don't get in the playoff, but you're going to put Notre Dame in, whose only losses in Northern Illinois, how is that fair? So I think there's definitely some debate there for who's a better one-loss team, if Notre Dame wins out here. But for this game, obviously, I got to go with Notre Dame here. As long as Jeremiah Love and Riley Leonard are healthy, it should be a win for the Irish.
Yeah, I obviously would love to see Army win this game. I mean, how can you not at this point? They're 9-0 on track for their best season since our grandparents were born. It's been so long since Army's had this much success in a season. But they have to play absolute mistake-free football for 60 minutes. And we saw with Navy that Notre Dame will force you into mistakes. So while I think Army is going to be a lot more competitive than Navy was, I just don't think they have enough. I think Notre Dame, yes, they haven't really beat anybody, but they have been beating up on teams. It's not like they're really struggling through games. So I do think they have enough to get through this game. It'll be right around that line, I think.
And at 7:30, I'm going with an upset. I think the Tigers are going to upset the Aggies because, we've seen this time and time again from Texas A&M. They lose these games right at the end of the year when their season is on the line. And I think the trend continues until they can figure that out. It's kind of tough to pick the Aggies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can get a bigger trap game than this game right here. I mean, you got struggling Auburn, but this is one of the hardest places to play in college football. It's a night game. And as we all know, Texas A&M playing Texas next week, a rivalry that has not been played in over a decade. So obviously they've had that game circled all year. SEC playoff implications, but none of that matters if they can't get out of Jordan Hare on Saturday. I think they do it, but this was a really tough one for me because, like I said, you can't have a bigger trap game. I just think if Auburn had shown us a little more up to this point, it'd be a lot easier to pick the upset. But Texas A&M, I think, can control the game just enough to get out of there with a win.
And I'm going with actually another upset here, but flop it. It's going to go on the road. Vandy goes into LSU and gets a win. And I think LSU is just reeling right now. They're struggling on the field and off the field. Like I said earlier, losing the number one commit to Michigan for $10.5 million, which is insane. But, the dominoes are going to fall from that, right? You lose the number one commit in the class. More than likely, some other guys are going to follow him. So I think it's just going to be an awful week for LSU. I'm sure Brian Kelly's thinking about that right now than this Vandy game. And, Vandy, I don't think they give two craps about any of that. And Vandy, proving the world wrong right now. Even at 6-4, it's a very successful year in the head coach's first year. And I think they get a huge road win to build on the program for years to come.
Yeah, this is another one that was tough for me to pick because, like you said, the vibes at LSU, complete opposite of Michigan. Obviously, they just lost out on the number one player in the country. They just lost two games in a row. They don't even know if they're bringing their coach back next year. So this was a tough one for me, but just the talent difference. And I know the vibes are not high, but it is still a night game at Death Valley, which is very tough. And I think that's the slight difference in this game. LSU wins a close one. I will say if they don't, they might fire Brian Kelly on his way to the handshake line because I don't think he survives another loss this year, especially to Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and if they do that buyout, I think it's like 60 million a year or something crazy. So don't know where they're getting that money from, but money's money.
They
And
need that NIL money apparently.
yeah, I guess now they got 10 million free. So we'll go to our last game. USC UCLA, obviously one of the most historic rivalry games in all of college football. I'm going with the Trojans here. You said it earlier. Lincoln Riley's playing for his job in this game. If he wins this game, I think he stays one more year. He's still bringing in good recruits. He kind of lost his quarterback this year, and I don't really think people are giving him the credit because he's 5-5. But Miller Moss was playing some good football, lost him, and then it's just been a whirlwind downhill right there. And I think USC can find a way to win this game, get to 6-5, and then go and play Notre Dame and hopefully have a competitive game next week.
Yeah, I do agree on one thing. I think Lincoln Riley's job is on the line, but one thing I'm just not sure of is whether he's kind of got a foot out the door looking towards the NFL or maybe another lucrative college job. Because this season has just been a failure for USC, coming off what really was a failure last year when they had Caleb Williams. And UCLA, yes, they're 4-6, but they were awful to start the year. I want to say they were 1-5 to start the year. Most people had them as the worst team in the 18 team Big Ten. But since then, they've really figured it out. They've had some big wins, beat Nebraska on the road. So I think this is going to be a motivation game for them. All the motivation's on their side. Big rivalry game at home. So I think they can pull off this upset.
Yeah, that's going to be it for our Week 13 picks and preview. Come back next week to see how we did. And obviously, we'll be breaking down next week's biggest rivalry games. But until the next time, the Bench Buddies are out.